Have you ever seen some of the ridiculous clips of people trying to hoard as much toilet paper as they could in the midst of an overcrowded Walmart? Now, why is it that they do that, despite officials continuously assuring everyone that there's plenty of supplies as long as everyone doesn't hoard? Today, we're gonna look into that exact problem and try to explain this kind of behavior based on the learnings of game theory. But what is a game? A game is a competition between two players. That could be two people, two companies, or really any two parties. Each stand in front of a decision, and with that, at least two options, the consequences of which define the final result. The easiest way to structure and visualize a game is via bimetrics, just like this one. The bimetrics essentially shows the payoff for each decision the players make, thus showing the payoff for both players in all possible scenarios. Let's pretend you're standing in front of a zebra crossing, wanting to cross the road. There's a car coming your way, and you're unsure if it's going to stop for you or not, so you also become unsure about whether to cross the road. This bimetrics shows the payoff for both players. So in the case that the car drives and you wait, the car gets a payoff of 10, because it can now get to work 10 seconds faster, while you get a payoff of 0, because now you have to wait for the car to drive by. In the opposite case, where you cross while the car waits, the payoffs are reversed. So what happens if both players choose to go? Well, then both players get a payoff of -10, because you most likely get injured or die, while the car probably goes to jail. If both of you wait, you get a payoff of 0, because you have to, well, wait. In this video, we'll be discussing two different kinds of games. The first kind of game is called a simultaneous game. This is a game where both players have to act at the same time and not go back on a decision. We can illustrate this example with two toilet paper needy people having to decide whether to hoard or take only what they need. With this, let's introduce a concept called a dominant strategy. A dominant strategy is, according to Perloff, a strategy that produces a higher payoff than any other strategy the player can use for every possible combination of its rival strategies. Said with simpler terms, it's the best strategy the player can choose. So let's look at the bimetrics again and try to find the dominant strategy. To find the dominant strategy for Conrad, we first remove the payoffs for Frank, because what's best for Conrad is not related to Frank's payoff. If Frank hoards, it's best for Conrad to also hoard. If Frank doesn't hoard, it's best for Conrad to hoard. So the dominant strategy for Conrad is to hoard. Since the payoff matrix is symmetrical, the same applies for Frank. So the dominant strategy for both players is to hoard, and thus they will land in a situation where they will both hoard and with a payoff of 2 each. That is despite the fact that the payoff would be higher for both if none of them hoarded, since that way there would be enough for everyone without the stress and consciousness. This kind of game, where both players could have ended up in a better position but had to default in a worse position due to a dominant strategy, is called the prisoner's dilemma. Imagine that the police have arrested 2 burglars and tell them that they will receive a much more lenient sentence if they snitch on one another. Here's the bimetrics showing how much prison time each will receive given what they both decide. We can see that if they both keep quiet, they will only receive 1 year of prison each, because the police can always find something minor to convict them. If both snitches, they will each get 4 years, and if only one of them snitches, that person will get off, while the other will receive 6 years. If we first look at the best strategy for Rick, we will see that if Morty doesn't snitch, it's best for Rick to snitch. And if Morty does snitch, it's best for Rick to also snitch. So the dominant strategy is always to snitch, and that's what they end up doing, both going to jail for 4 years, even though they could have ended up with only 1 if they somehow could make sure that the other person would also keep quiet. Let's take a look at the fourth game. This time it's between a man and a woman who are engaged. JC and his wife before they got married, fiancé. It's their date night and they want to go to watch a movie. JC wants to watch Oppenheimer and the fiancé wants to go watch Barbie. But they don't want to go alone, that would ruin the entire idea of a date night. So they only get a payoff if they go together. If we start looking for a dominating strategy, something weird occurs. If JC goes to watch Oppenheimer, it's best for fiancé to also watch Oppenheimer. But if JC watches Barbie, it's best for fiancé to also go watch Barbie. So here, there is no dominant strategy. One player's response depends on what the other does. This is where we introduce Nash Equilibriums, another answer to how to solve a game. To find the Nash Equilibrium, we have to find something called best response. So for each player's move, we look at the other player's best response, which is what we essentially did when we first looked at the game. So if fiancé goes to watch Oppenheimer, JC's best response is to watch Oppenheimer as well. If fiancé goes to watch Barbie, it's also best for JC to watch Barbie. The same goes for fiancé. So with that, we've found our Nash Equilibriums. In this case, there are two, so the solution is for the players to collaborate and just go to the movies 2 times. The second kind of game is called a sequential game. This game is different in the way that one player first moves and then the second player moves based on that. This time it's about a kid who wants to go all in on streaming and his mom who has trouble deciding whether to support him or not. Let's instead illustrate this with a game tree where the kid moves first. So if the kid decides to stream, his mom has 2 choices. Either she supports him or she provides no support whatsoever. But if the kid decides to stream and his mom supports it, this is where he will be most happy. He can live out his dream while being provided for. If she doesn't support him, he will have a much tougher time, but will still live out his dream. Mom, on the other hand, will not be happy either way if he streams. If she doesn't support him, it will seriously strain their relationship, and she will be disowned in the near future. If she does support him, she uses a lot of resources, rarely sees her son, but will still keep him. If the kid instead doesn't stream, Mom will be very happy. She will of course support his choice of not streaming, while he gets a payoff of 2 because he'll probably get a mediocre career in finance. So using game theory, we can deduce why this is going to end. The kid sees a payoff of either 2 or 10, or a payoff of 0 and 2, depending on the choice. So he will of course go stream, because that's where the biggest payoffs are. From Mom's perspective, we can deduce that she will support him, because if she doesn't, she will get a much lower payoff. They end in the scenario where he starts streaming and she supports him. So what if the mom threatens the son with something like, "If you start streaming, I will disown you"? Well, from game theory, that's what we call a non-credible threat. Because if the kid chooses to stream, it's still better for her to keep a son that streams rather than disowning him completely.